everyone, and welcome to our stream about interpersonal violence and domestic violence. Lindsay Wilson is with us again, and today she is going to be talking about strength at home. Lindsay, welcome and take it away. What can you tell us about strength at home?
Thank you, Rosalia. Strength at Home is one of the therapeutic services that we offer through the IPV assistance program here at the VA. Strength at Home is actually two groups. So we have a Strength at Home veterans group and we have a Strength at Home couples group. And overall, the point of them is to help people better deal with conflict in their relationships, better communicate with their partners, in the hopes of preventing or reducing intimate partner violence in those relationships.
So, how does one get access or become or how does one get to be in Strength at Home?
Sure. It's pretty easy. People can contact us directly. We can share our contact information. You can also be referred by a provider. For Strength at Home veterans, sometimes we actually get referrals from our Veterans Justice Program or from parole or probation officers, because sometimes, when veterans have legal trouble related to their relationship conflict, they are required to do some sort of group or therapeutic intervention that relates to intimate partner violence. And often Strength at Home is something they can use for that purpose. I will just say as a caveat, there are specific approved programs within the state of Maryland that are considered abuse intervention programs. Strength at Home isn't one of them, just because our program is structured a little bit differently from the community. But often, if it's discussed with parole, probation, or specific judges, they will accept it for veterans. So we get referrals from there as well. For couples, usually we are getting referrals from providers or people contacting us directly. And for Strength at Home couples, only one of the members of the couple has to be a veteran. So even if you're a veteran who has a partner who's not a veteran, and you guys are having these issues, you guys can still do Strength at Home couples. Certainly we have some couples that are both veterans, but it doesn't have to be the case for people to get referred to us to join the group.
So, what are some of the things that veterans learn at Strength at Home? Because when you say communicate better, that's such an abstract concept.
Sure.
Like, can you give some examples of what that means? And is there a structure to the Strength at Home?
Yes, there is. Thank you for asking, Rosalia. So the Strength at Home Veterans Program is 12 sessions. So you would meet once a week for 12 weeks. Each session is 2 hours, which sounds very long, but I promise that it goes by quicker than 2 hours. Usually we have, often we find ourselves with veterans who are like, oh no, we're done. Because people do kind of get discussing things. So the Veterans Program, both of them kind of start with an intro of just, what's sort of going on here, orienting people to the group. We also start with a discussion of sort of the pros and cons of aggressive behavior, just because it sounds counterintuitive to talk about pros of aggressive behavior, right? Because we're saying don't do this, but there are pros. That's why people do it. No one would use aggressive behavior if you didn't get something out of it. So that's to kind of just get the discussion going. We move into talking about how trauma can impact relationships. We also talk about different kinds of abuse, because sometimes maybe we're doing things that we don't realize are abusive behaviors, especially when it comes to like psychological or like emotional verbal abuse. Those things we may not recognize that behavior. I think it's easy to think of like physical abuse, but some of the other stuff can be more subtle. But yeah, a lot of people have had difficult experiences. They've experienced trauma, and that can lead to things like issues with trust, issues with self-esteem, and those things can also then contribute to conflict in relationships, right? If you have trust issues, that might show up with your partner. So we talk through those things. We get into conflict management. So we talk about anger. Anger being an emotion that everybody has that serves a purpose, but also how can we maybe express it in a way that's more healthy and not aggressive. We talk about some techniques like timeouts. So, if you're in a relationship where there is conflict, we talk about maybe recognizing how, when things are escalating, and how we can maybe take some time apart and then come back at a time when we can have a more productive conversation. We get into some coping strategies. So first we talk about survival mode thinking, which I think is something, especially people who've experienced trauma, I think it may be common for veterans who've been in combat to have this sort of lens of survival mode, right? Perceiving things as a threat, or like interpreting things in a negative way. So, and you can imagine how that impacts a relationship, right? If you interpret everything in a negative way and your partner says something, if you interpret it in the most negative way, now it's a fight. So we talk about that and how to maybe combat that. We also talk about stress generally. What are different kinds of stress? How can we cope with that? Because obviously we know when we're stressed, that impacts our relationship. And the last 6 sessions really get into communication, and we get into specific skills like you alluded to, Rosalia. So we first talk about the roots of everyone's communication style, because we know that we learn to communicate maybe from the family we grew up in. How did people express anger? How did people express other emotions? In the military, people learn certain ways to communicate. And then maybe even in life since the military, we talk about all of those things so people can kind of start unpacking where some of these things came from. We get into more specific skills, active listening. I think we talked about this last week, but active listening, being able to sort of actually listen to your partner, to understand and not just to respond, right? Helping them feel heard, so that you guys can have a more productive conversation. We next get into assertive messages. So how can you get your point across, communicate how you're feeling about something, but in a way that's not aggressive, right? We still want to.
Can you show us or give an example of the difference between an aggressive response and an assertive response? Because a lot of people don't understand the difference between being aggressive and being assertive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's say, for example, your partner leaves their shoes on the floor. They come in and just dump all their shoes on the floor, right? And that's really annoying. An aggressive response, maybe you yell at them, right? Stop leaving your shoes on the floor. What's wrong with you? Why are you leaving your shoes on the floor? You think I'm your maid? Are you an idiot? Why would you leave your shoes on the floor like that? That's aggressive. An assertive way would be like, hey, it's really frustrating. I feel really frustrated when you leave your shoes on the floor. Can you please put them in the closet?
Sounds much nicer.
Yeah, but you're still saying what bothers you and asking them to do something differently. We don't want you to not say what you think. That takes you into passive. And we talk about that in the group too, that if you're too passive, these things build up until it kind of explodes, and then we might end up in aggressive. So you want to still get your point across. You're allowed to be frustrated or annoyed or angry at your partner, but we want to communicate it in a way that's respectful and productive and easier to be heard. Because I think the way that I was saying the aggressive response, I think to me, that just makes someone want to be aggressive back, right? They're just going to want to argue with you. Whereas if you're more calm and respectful, maybe people are a little bit more willing to engage.
Can we go back a little bit to conflict?
Yeah.
With the strength at home, conflict is a fact of life. Everyone faces conflict every day, whether it's with your neighbor next door or whether it's with the, any kind of company that says it didn't get your payment when you paid it. Like there's conflict all the time.
Yeah.
In the Strength of Home program, do you find that there is a constellation of conflicts that plague every relationship? It's just a matter of how they handle it. I mean, because, when 2 people or more are living in the house, there's bound to be conflict, but part of that, some of that's normal and natural in trying to adjust to living with others.
Absolutely. Yeah. Conflict is inevitable. It just is part of it whenever there's more than one person involved. And so that's why we don't really talk about avoiding conflict. It happens. So that's why we were talking about, and you're going to get angry too, right? Like I said, that's a normal thing. Anger is a healthy emotion that exists to tell you something about a situation, right? It usually is like, I don't like this. This doesn't sit right with me. So anger serves a purpose. Conflict is going to happen because unfortunately, everybody doesn't, fortunately, sometimes it feels unfortunate. Everybody doesn't think the same way. Everyone doesn't have come with the same experiences. So it's natural that some of my stuff and some of your stuff are just gonna butt up against each other at some point. So the idea is, like you said, about how to handle that in a way that is healthy, respectful, constructive, rather than aggression and potentially violence and like abusive behavior. Because sometimes that's where we go, right? It's I'm right and I want to kind of dominate this conflict and you need to hear what I have to say, so I'm going to yell it at you. And maybe there's a way that if we can kind of express ourselves in an assertive way, if we can take a time out when we're feeling really heated, that we can work through whatever the conflict is. But absolutely, it's going to happen. And I think it's really just about how we can approach it.
Well, is there specific conflicts that people in relationships face that maybe others is like, are there specific sources of conflict that you teach veterans and their couples how or people how to handle, like conflicts over money, conflicts over in-laws, conflicts over kids, conflicts over pets? I mean, there's a whole lot of home-related things. So is there a constellation of conflicts that cause the most problems?
I think it really varies based on people. So one of the good things about being in a group like this is that people get to sort of bring their own examples. So like when we talk about timeouts, we really talk through like what situations could you use this in, and how are you going to do it, and how will you signal to each other, and how long of a timeout will you take? And the point is too, if they have a partner at the time that they're in the group, is that they also talk about this plan with their partner, because you don't want to do it unilaterally, because then it's not helpful. You're just walking away in the middle of an argument. But we also know that you want to talk about it before you need it. That way it's something you can use. So I think that it varies. We also have a lot of there's homework in the group. We call them practice assignments, but it's basically homework. We do a lot of there are forms called anger analysis forms, where each week when we come back to group, the veterans have had a chance to think about a situation where they got angry over the past week and how they handled it, right? And also how they recognized it within themselves. So like, what were your physical feelings when you felt angry? What thoughts were you having? What other emotions were you having? Because usually, like, anger obviously is an emotion, but like a lot of times anger kind of shields something a little more vulnerable under it. So maybe you're really like embarrassed, but the anger's on top of it, or like you're hurt. So we talk through that, and then we talk about how they responded and maybe how they could have responded differently. So I think that also gives an opportunity for us to see the sort of wide variety of conflict that people can experience in relationships or in their life generally, because it is so, the trigger points for everybody are so different, right? Like there are some people that get really annoyed when like someone's late, and some people that we had a couple in Strength at Home couples that their daughters-in-law were always a source of conflict for them. So I think it really varies by person. And the good thing is, everything that we do, you can kind of bring yourself to it, talk about what the issues are for you, and work through it that way.
So after the 8-week program is over, what happens then? Because it's not like even 8 weeks seems like an overnight fix, and it's sort of not an overnight fix.
Sure.
So can people repeat if they feel the need to? Can they, is there another program they can graduate to?
Yes. So the Strength at Home Veterans Program, 12 weeks. People can repeat it later if they want to do that. There's also, so the general Strength at Home 12 weeks is considered phase 1. So people can do, it goes up to phase 3. I will say locally, that's not something that we've done because we just haven't had the interest, but it is something that exists, and certainly if there's like interest from our veterans, we can always do it. And those kind of do a little more deep unpacking of some of this stuff. So stage 2 gets into what are considered like core themes that relate to trauma. So there's like more talk about trust, more talk about self-esteem, shame, power and control, those sorts of things. And stage 3, they're both shorter too. Stage 2 is 8 weeks. Stage 3 is 6 weeks. I'm sorry. And that one gets into tolerating distress and also handling potentially difficult situations. So they sort of just give you a lot more time because, like you said, it is the 12 weeks. It feels long when I say it, 12 weeks of 2 hours a week, but like it does fly by, and it is kind of introductory. And certainly some people find that they want to do some individual work. Maybe it sets them up to do couples work. I've had veterans who, once they started talking, like I said, we talk about how your communication style came from your family. Once they started talking about their family, they were like, I have some stuff to unpack. And then they connected to trauma therapy to do some additional work to build on this. So definitely there's opportunities to build more on this work. I think it just sort of depends on what the individual veteran needs. And that's something that we talk about in the last session. About, how do we plan ahead? How do you want to take this and kind of move forward from here? Just to make sure you can keep building.
Those veterans who are referred to by the justice system, do they have to go through a certain length of time? Like, are there arrangements for longer periods of training or longer periods of intervention? How does that work?
Usually they just need to complete the group. So once they've done all 12 sessions and they have their completion certificate, that's that. But sometimes they need some additional stuff. Sometimes they maybe need to get into individual therapy. So it sort of varies for people. I will say the community programs that are like the state certified programs are longer typically than Strength at Home, but they also are a little bit less. They do a lot more education and less kind of getting into sort of the deeper like therapy unpacking work. So it's just a little bit different. But usually when people are going to just do Strength at Home, they just have to do Strength at Home.
And how many, is there a cap to how many veterans can be in Strength at Home group at one time?
We try to keep the groups pretty small. I think the max that we would usually take is 7, and 7 is even kind of a lot because we also have 2 facilitators in every group. So I think a sweet spot is like 5, maybe 6 is good because you can get some good discussion. It's also a closed group, which means you can't just kind of join at any time. Like you have to start at session 1. And so we have like a start date and end date for a group. So, if you miss the beginning of this group, we would either schedule you for our next group, or we, thankfully, a lot of the VAs are still doing these groups virtually. So if people can't wait, we can always connect them to a group that's coming up at another VA. But we try to keep it small. It seems like that has been, in the groups I've done, that works best, just because you have enough people to have some discussion, but it's not overwhelming. Everyone still gets a chance to talk and share. And I think sometimes being in a group too, like for our veterans, like that feels like a lot. I don't want to talk about my business with everybody, but I do think that it does give you a real chance to relate to other people. I find people really like, yes, exactly, when they hear other people talking. And sometimes too, it's really nice to just be able to be like, kind of offer your feedback to each other. Sometimes kind of like people kind of check each other in the group, right? Like, hey man, I think that actually was aggressive. That kind of thing. And so it becomes a really good, like, supportive environment for everybody. Cause I think also, like, you don't want to come to a group and just hear like me talk the whole time. So it's a really nice environment. Once people kind of get in.
So did the Strength at Home couples grow out of the Strength at Home with the veterans only?
Yes. So both of these were developed within the VA by some staff in Boston at the National Center for PTSD. And I think that we found that there are a lot of couples that have what we would call bidirectional conflict. So it's sort of coming from both sides. So they wanted to offer an option for those people. And the couples group, it goes over all the same information as the regular Strength at Home, but both partners are part of it. The exercises are a little bit different, and it's shorter. It's only 8 weeks, but it does cover the same stuff. So we go over like, what are different kinds of abuse? How does trauma impact relationships? How can we use timeouts in handling conflict? We do all the same, like the active listening, the assertive messages, where'd your communication come from, expressing feelings. And then also in both groups, we talk about common communication issues people fall into. That's usually like the always, never kind of stuff. That's always, there I am. That can be a big issue in arguments, right? You always, you never, or like, I'm going to save up everything I'm mad about and dump it on you at one time. Like those sorts of things that we see in arguments. And I think, again, it's the communication stuff, I think, is really useful for everybody, because I think that generally active listening, assertive communication is not necessarily like the baseline for people.
Mm-hmm.
So it is always a good reminder, I think, for everyone, for me, that we need to do these things, right? That when we're in an argument, you gotta argue about that argument, right? You can't argue about 10 arguments ago kind of thing. So, but yeah, Strength at Home Couples gives both of the people the opportunity to learn these skills directly. In the regular Strength at Home program, the veterans, like I said, there are exercises where if they have a partner, they can practice with them, right? They're supposed to practice active listening with them and stuff like that. But this time, kind of both members of the couple can be there and work on things. And like I said, they have different assignments. So sometimes their assignments are like, you write down something that you like that your partner did and tell them. It's called caught doing something nice. Because sometimes I think, especially when there's a lot of conflict, we are stuck on the negative stuff. This is what I don't like that you did. You made me mad, da 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 da. But like, what is good, right? Because there's something that's like keep you in a relationship. So I think it's a really good opportunity. And it's for couples that do want to stay together, right? So sometimes people want to kind of break up and process that. And that is certainly something that's worth working on. It's not what this group is for. But it's, like I said, an opportunity, usually when there's kind of more verbal, emotional conflict back and forth, for both members of the couple to be present, to learn the skills and practice them together with some support from facilitators.
So if there are relationships in which where it's more physical abuse, does Strength at Home also help those couples when physical abuse is involved rather than just verbal or emotional abuse?
So it sort of depends. I will say for couples, again, we usually want it to be something where it is more bidirectional. So if it is like one person kind of being physically abusive toward another person, they probably wouldn't be a good fit for the Strength at Home couples group. If there's been an incident where maybe there was like pushing and shoving in the midst of an argument, that's a maybe. We do, for everyone coming into Strength at Home, the veterans program and the couples program, we do an intake assessment just to make sure that like this is appropriate for you. So that's something that we would talk through. I think sometimes a thing that we run into is maybe there's the members of the couple have a very different recollection, explanation of what's going on, and they might not be super appropriate for couples, right? Because if someone's like, my partner is screaming at me and yelling at me and hitting me regularly, and the other partner's is like, we argue from time to time, like I don't know if this is going to be the right space for them. Sometimes it might be more appropriate for a veteran to do the Strength at Home veterans program by themselves and then maybe revisit couples.
So what is some feedback that you've gotten from veterans who have gone through both of these programs?
I think that we sometimes the best feedback, as I mentioned, one group I did, I had a veteran call me and say that it was a relief to start talking about some of these things, and that was a veteran that I referred to trauma therapy. That was really heartening for me, that it just sort of like opened the door for them to talk about these things, because I think that's a hard thing when we're carrying like trauma with us. To If we don't deal with it, then it does manifest in these ways through like conflict and aggression and stuff like that. I've had a lot of veterans offer like good feedback. They've found the information to be helpful. They found their other group members to be supportive and helpful, right? They offer each other suggestions. They exchange phone numbers at the end sometimes, to be there for each other and sort of kind of keep each other on track too. Yeah, I think that it's an opportunity, like I said, I think, to share how these things apply to you and to figure out how you can kind of improve your skills, improve your like relationship in a way that makes sense for you, with the recognition of like, you know, you've been through some stuff and that shows up, and here's how we can maybe interrupt that cycle a little bit. But couples, I think, similarly, there have been people who've found the conversations that they've been able to have with their partners very helpful. I've had people in the individual veterans group come back and say that their partner can see a difference in the way they're communicating with them, which is great to hear, that they're maybe less quick to anger, that they feel like they can really listen to them, and that they're getting their point across in a way that isn't so aggressive, which is definitely like what we love to hear. So I think, you know, we've gotten some good feedback, and hopefully we continue to do so.
So how can veterans self-refer to these programs? And if there's a phone number they can call, I'm going to write it. I'm going to put it in the comments,
Yes,
so that people can see it.
absolutely. I will. I'll send it to you. Maybe you can just copy and paste it. That might be easiest.
Okay.
There are two.
Actually, are you able to write it on the bottom where it says all at the bottom?
Oh yes, I will just copy and paste that there. So yes, there are two coordinators here at VAMX. But it looks like I can't. It wants me to connect a YouTube account. So there are two coordinators here. I cover the greater Baltimore area. So if you go to like Baltimore, Fort Meade, Glen Burnie, Lock Raven, Eastern Baltimore County, or if you live in Carroll or Howard, I am the coordinator that covers your area. My number is 410-591-3004.
Wait a minute, 591-3004.
Yes, and I emailed it to you too, Rosalie. If you can, I don't
know.
I
would like to, while we're on the show, if anybody wants to, I'm just going to say, for Strength at Home program in the greater Baltimore area.
And then the other coordinator, her name is Caitlin Savarese.
Kaitlin.
Yes.
Savory.
Savarese, Savarese. And she covers Perry Point and the Eastern Shore.
And how can veterans reach her?
Her number is 443-525-0979.
Okay, so I also heard you say virtual. So do we also offer virtual programs so that people can participate virtually?
Yes. Right now, we've just continued to offer the groups virtually just because we have kind of a large catchment area, and that's been the way that it's easiest to get everybody in, right? It's hard if we have a group in Baltimore for our veterans on the Eastern Shore or like up near Perry Point to get here. So we found that doing it virtually allows sort of the greatest kind of bang for our buck in terms of both veterans and our staff too, because sometimes that way, like Caitlin and I can do a group together, and Caitlin's up in Perry Point and I'm in Baltimore. So it has made it easier for everyone to access, and partners too. People have work. It's easier to kind of step out into your car than have to come in to the medical center. So we are still offering them virtually. And as I mentioned, most other sites are still offering them virtually. So usually if we can't get someone into our group here in terms of couples or the veterans program, we've had great success in connecting them to groups at other VAs, just so that they can, they don't have to wait to get into like our next round of groups, and they can get the services as soon as possible.
All right. Is there anything I didn't ask you about Strength at Home that you want veterans and their, spouses to know? Is it open to all veterans, regardless of orientation? So can you talk a little bit about
Yes,
the welcoming?
Absolutely.
atmosphere?
The groups are open to any and all veterans. They're typically gender segregated groups. So we actually just earlier this year had our first Strength at Home women's group here, because we know that, it's not just men that can be aggressive in relationships, women too. So it's open to anyone. And again, you don't have to be of a certain sexual orientation. It's open to all veterans, regardless of gender, sexuality, age, etc. We also sometimes throughout the country, different VAs do specific LGBTQ groups. So that's something that if someone is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, that we can work with them to try to identify too. And same goes for couples as well. There's not a particular, you don't have to be a heterosexual couple to join the group. And we work with people to try to make sure that we can kind of get them in the environment that feels most comfortable and safe for them. So yeah, absolutely. Anybody can join. The groups, like I said, the Strength at Home veterans groups, we tend to do like women's groups and men's groups, but we can always kind of make things work for people. And I think, like I said, if you have questions, if you're not sure if like a group time can work for you, we really do our best to like do what we can make work. Sometimes people need a later group, and we can try to connect with the VAs in California, since they're 3 hours behind us, right? And connect you with a group that's going to be in the evening here. So we really want to make sure if people are interested that we can connect them. It's also not something that you have to wait for things to be like bad to join, right? If you feel like you're getting aggressive, you're getting to the point that you're very angry at your partner, and you're starting to like yell more, you can join the group. You don't have to like have perpetrated some act of violence to join us. It's if these are just skills you want to work on. Like I said, I think that they're probably skills that like everybody can use a refresher on. Communicating more effectively in a healthy way, I think that's useful for all of us. You can always join. It doesn't have to, you don't have to like wait for something for things to get worse or escalate or anything like that. If it's something you're concerned about within yourself, within your relationship, please join us. I'll just emphasize that Strength at Home is really about conflict, aggression within the context of an intimate relationship. It's not like a general anger management thing. There are other groups for that. So if you're just having anger generally, that might be something to talk to your social workers, your mental health providers, et cetera, about getting connected with. But if you're dealing with these things within the context of a relationship, whether you're dating, married, partnered, whatever it is, Strength at Home is for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for all this important information. I hope the veterans and their family members who are out there and they hear it will take advantage of these programs. They're really wonderful programs. And I think that's it. So I want to thank everyone for watching. And if you have questions, the numbers are there in the comment section. So we'll see you next week. What's the topic for next week?
Next week, we're going to talk about a new intervention that we have for people who are experiencing intimate partner violence called RISE.
All right. So next week, I'm looking forward to hearing all about RISE. In the meantime, we hope everyone has a great day, and bye for now.
Bye.